Right, our next session focuses on a critical and urgent issue, combating modern slavery in supply chains. Led by Ben Vogel and our expert panel, this discussion is going to delve into the challenges and solutions surrounding this pressing topic. This session is also going to be recorded for the First Sight podcast, hosted by Construction News. So if you miss anything, you can revisit and share it with others in the wider construction industry. It is a fantastic way to keep this vital conversation alive. Right, joining us for this important discussion are Colleen Theron, CEO and founder of Ardea International, Dame Sarah Thornton, Professor of Modern Slavery Policy Rights Lab at University of Nottingham, Izzy Butler, Placement and Partnership Officer at Bright Future, and Amelia Woodley, ESG Director at Speedy Hire. Right, let's dive straight into this essential conversation.
Welcome back to the second part of this month's CN First Sight podcast, recorded at the Speedy Hire Live Sustainability Summit. I'm Ben Vogel, Deputy Editor of Construction News, and in this segment we will be looking into the issue of modern slavery. Now, construction has long been regarded as high risk for modern slavery due to ongoing challenges such as labour and skills shortages, resulting in hiring from abroad and using temporary migrant workers. And there are figures to back this up. For instance, in 2023, there was a report published by the charity Unseen, which found that the number of modern slavery victims calling in relation to construction sites had gone up by 269%. So, what should contractors and the supply chain be doing to crack down on the issue? Joining me on the panel are Amelia Woodley, ESG Director of Speedy Hire. Hello, Amelia.
Hi, Ben.
Izzy Butler, Placement and Partnership Officer for Bright Future. Hello,
Hi,
Izzy.
Ben.
And also joining us virtually are Colleen Theron, CEO of Ardea International. Hello, Colleen. Can you hear us?
Hello. Hi, Ben. Hi, Amelia. Hi, Izzy. Lovely to see you.
And last but by no means least is Dame Sarah Thornton, the UK's Independent Anti-Slavery Commissioner from 2019 to 2022, and now a consultant for CCLA Investment Management. Hello, Dame Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Wonderful to be here as well. So may I start with you, Dame Sarah? You chaired a high-level roundtable earlier this year on the issue of modern slavery, and there was a report accompanying it. So perhaps you could summarise the key findings.
Well, it's as you say that we've known for a long time that the construction industry is high risk, both in terms of labour in the UK, because of the structure of the business, the sorts of people who sometimes work in construction, but also the supply chain is high risk, and a lot of the materials are coming from all sorts of parts of the globe. Very long supply chains, pretty opaque, and real concerns about forced labour at the ends of those supply chains. So we brought together a whole group of people. So the construction industry, absolutely key. Investors, really important, investors in construction, but also the regulator, the Gangmaster and Labour Abuse Authority, and the government in terms of Cabinet Office, and also quite a few NGOs. And we were saying, look, we all know that this is really high risk, it's serious, and we're not doing very well. And we need to really focus on that commitment from the top and really looking to find and fix modern slavery. So it was a really good roundtable. And what I'm really pleased to say is that lots of different concrete actions have come out of it. So one of the things we've been encouraging the construction sector to look at is how they can share information and intelligence where they're concerned about labour issues. How can they work together much more to address these issues? And what does it mean in terms of leadership from the top? And I've heard some of the construction companies have really said, look, you know, we're not doing well enough here. The focus is on us, and they have brought people in to have a really good look at not just their processes and their systems, but also about the way people are treated.
Thank you. That's a very interesting summary and underlines the need for collaboration and a joined-up approach. Looking at things from an industry perspective involved in the plant hire sector, does that tally with the initiatives that you're involved in, Amelia?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, modern slavery is not new to the construction sector. I've been involved in it for about a decade now, since the legislation came out. So for us, we have to look at two different things. We have to look at what is the modern slavery risk in terms of the workforce, not directly employed people, because we have really strong processes around that, such as right to work checks that we do as part of our daily onboarding. But if there's labour forces that we use or employment agencies that we use as part of our supply chain activity, because we have to be really conscious that we're doing the same amount of checks of those employment agencies as we're doing in our own organisation. But then as a plant hire company, we are bringing kit in from all over the world, China, India, Europe, and we've got to understand what those risks are as well. So we've got to look at what is the risk in our global supply chains, but a particular angle that we're looking at, Ben, is around the eco-transition, because I'm really conscious that as we transition to net zero and we bring in lots of battery technologies, we don't want to have that transition built on potential modern slavery risks. So
this extends beyond the actual labour on site, which is perhaps the tip of a broader iceberg involving the manufacture of equipment and hardware abroad.
Absolutely, because we're bringing that kit onto construction sites. So if we don't have strong processes and due diligence around the kit that we're buying from around the world, and we're bringing that kit onto site and we're using that kit, we are introducing risk. And a number of our customers are very active in this space, and they will come in and they will audit us from the operational side, the recruitment side, but also they're saying, well, where are you getting those products from that we are hiring from you to build our construction sites. So we have a huge amount of work that we do around all of the products and services, but particularly the heightened due diligence we've done with Ardia International around the eco products, because it would be a terrible story if we achieved net zero and patted ourselves all on the back for that, but it was built on a terrible human rights program. So we're very active in this space. We have been for over a year working with Ardia to build really strong due diligence from policy and leadership right down into kind of, the reporting and the communication that we have to do publicly.
So clearly process is a very important issue in this regard. And Colleen, perhaps you can add your perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much. And as Amelia says, it's been a pleasure working with her and the team for quite some time. And I think, what the challenge is for a lot of organizations is, in the first instance, to actually just establish, what their gaps are. What are they good at? What are the real gaps in terms of what they need to actually focus on, and that's the work that we've been doing. We've been looking at how we can strengthen policy commitments and then building more practical processes, because that is what you can use to really delve into all the different areas. For example, Amelia mentioned heightened due diligence. What does that mean? What does it mean to ask further questions and to really look behind some of the answers and some of the reports that are provided to businesses that perhaps don't tell the whole story, where you do need to ask other questions around where things are coming from. And I think that what is interesting is that for many businesses, they think that their policies and processes are all sufficient. And then something goes wrong and they don't have that documented process to look at. And I think that is the piece that we've really been looking at in the last year, is how do we ensure that if something untoward did crop up from a business perspective in terms of risk mitigation, that we have something appropriate to point to. And in this journey, kind of bringing us, as we've heard the whole day, I think what's been so interesting about today is how Amelia and her team are bringing all the different elements to their sustainability objectives and views, and addressing modern slavery and how you treat people is absolutely core to that.
Okay, and perhaps I can bring you in here, Izzy. Mm-hmm. It's clearly addressing modern slavery, cracking down on it, mitigating it, hopefully one day eliminating it, although that's perhaps an ambitious objective.
Yeah.
It requires a degree of cultural change from within all kinds of industries, and construction is no exception. What kind of progress have you noticed in this regard?
Yeah, so I think that it's brilliant that there's more awareness about modern slavery, particularly in the construction sector. And we're seeing businesses focus on tackling modern slavery, which is excellent. One area that remains quite low is in remediation. So Sarah will know much more than this, but the CCLA recently came out with their benchmark for 2024. And yeah, we saw amazing progression from businesses in regards to modern slavery, but one area that remained really low and quite weak was in remediation. And so that's what we do at Bright Future Cooperative. We're really tangible in a really practical way to look at remediation and look at a survivor's journey doesn't end when they are identified. That's when their journey begins. It begins when they are identified and when they are then starting their recovery journey. And that's when we can really work with businesses to step in and to provide that support and look at getting survivors back into employment that is safe and that is stable and that doesn't have those risks of re-exploitation, because otherwise we see that constant cycle of survivors not having access to employment and therefore being exploited again because they continue to be vulnerable.
So there are instances of repeat victims?
Yes, yeah.
Modern slavery?
Yeah, very common. I worked for a long time on the front line supporting survivors, and it would be very common that survivors would enter support, be in our support for 6 months to a year, and then leave our support, and a year later they'll be back in there because they've been exploited again, because there isn't an accessible route to employment, and they struggle to find that. And it's why Bright Future exists in the first place. The reason we exist is because a survivor once said to their advocate, I feel I have no choice but to return to my exploitation in order to put food on the table for my family. And that's when Causeway noticed this issue and noticed this gap in support, and that's how Bright Future really exists.
I see. So yeah, that's an important consequence of that perhaps isn't covered by the legislation as it stands. It doesn't really address remediation. It just addresses the, well, I would say basic, but perhaps it's not basic.
Yeah.
The admittedly complex issue of detecting and penalising the firms involved in modern slavery itself. I mean, I would like to turn to the law as it currently stands, the Modern Slavery Act 2015, which the panel are doubtless better acquainted with than I am. Is it fit for purpose? A rather blunt, provocative question, but looking at it from the point of view, for instance, of the construction industry, it exempts companies with a turnover of under 36 million from having to report, and yet small and medium enterprises make up the backbone of the construction industry in the UK. There's about 90% plus of the industry is SMEs. So are we missing something here in the legislation? Perhaps, Sarah, you'd like to pick that one up?
So the Modern Slavery Act was world leading when it was passed, but that's back in 2015, and the world has caught us up and overtaken us, I'm afraid, since then. It's regarded that, you know, the requirement for companies over £36 million annual turnover to write a modern slavery statement was a good first step. But if companies don't do it, there's never been any sanction for them. There is also a sense in which it's all about reporting, not actually taking action, and there are concerns about that. And I think it's widely accepted in the UK, at the very least, we need to update our Modern Slavery Act. But what has also happened in the meantime is the European Union have passed in the last year the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, which will mandate the very largest companies to do both environmental and human rights due diligence. That doesn't, of course, include the UK, and I think there's a real concern that we are falling behind international best practice. To your point about smaller companies, there's nothing to stop smaller companies from writing modern slavery statements, nothing to stop them from doing due diligence. But you're absolutely right, they're not required by law. And I think if the government were to look at the Modern Slavery Act, look at toughening it up and tightening it up, one obvious thing would be to say, do we want to reduce that £36 million threshold to bring it down a little bit, to bring more companies in scope? So I think it's generally agreed that the law does need to be updated.
Thank you. Colleen.
Then may I make a comment on that?
Please do.
I mean, it is interesting when you're referring to the thresholds and, whether or not they should be reduced. I mean, globally, it is in legislation, there is generally turnover thresholds that are put in place. And that is, that from a legislative drafting point of view is common practice. And actually with the CS3D, SMEs are exempted from that, but there is a very particular requirement that bigger companies should take some kind of responsibility to actually build capacity and to hold the hand as such of SMEs, because there is that awareness of a trickle-down effect. So, I think that the acknowledgement that there are many SMEs and potentially they will have a collectively very big impact is understood, but there is perhaps a need to do more of that hand-holding, and an event actually like today that's been put on by Speedy Hire is probably invaluable for all of those SMEs that are participating, because they won't be exempt of the requirements for them to address their own policies and processes, but actually being given guidance perhaps on where to go for resources or how to tackle training and how to manage some of these things where it is more of a challenge, and perhaps if you're a much bigger organization is going to be the critical part.
Thank you. It's interesting that you mention the need for larger companies to cooperate with their supply chains to make sure that this scourge of modern slavery is tackled properly. Amelia, with your experience and knowledge of the sector and the construction sector, do you think that there's still too much of a siloed approach in the industry when it comes to dealing with this problem?
We're all, suffering the same issues in terms of a modern slavery perspective. It's, as I said, this is nothing new to the construction sector. I think we probably tend to do our own thing, and what Speedy is trying to work really hard on is that collaboration piece. So going back to what Colleen said, we've got a real focus now around the supply chain. We've done a lot of work over the last year and a half, again, to get our metaphorical house in order. We've done a very detailed gap analysis, drawn out a roadmap, and we've been systematically going through that for the last 18 months to move our performance up. We take a huge responsibility for this because it's a value chain issue. So, we're embarking on a programme now where we recognise that the supply chain represents 60%. The SME, represents 60% of our supply chain. So we're going to be doing that hand-holding for them, because we can't just stay in our own lanes. And we are a tier one. We do have some leverage and weight, so we should look down the supply chain and actually try and tackle these issues together. But to go back to the Izzy point around Bright Future, because Speedy is a partner of Bright Future, we can't forget the people at the heart of this. This is to do with victims of modern slavery, and having that human-centric approach to it, and ensuring that if we know that the biggest challenge is around remediation, and it's the area that's very much overlooked, and a lot of people are focusing on policy and processes. And, we sit in various working groups and conferences and have various discussions, and it's all very process-led. What we're trying to do as a business at Speedy, with the support of the experts, is bring that remediation piece out, in the sense of you don't have to find it in your supply chain to contribute. You can actually work with these partners and support survivors now. So for us, we want to break those silos, and we want to influence that change together.
Thank you. If for some unaccountable reason there's a construction firm out there that is blissfully unaware of the problem of modern slavery. Unlikely scenario, but imagine it.
Yeah.
Please, Izzy. Could you kind of summarise and give a kind of a practical bullet point how-to guide for a company to spot the signs of modern slavery and what to do about it?
Yeah, I think that it's important to remember that it happens everywhere. Last year, 17,000 survivors were identified. It was estimated at around 130,000 survivors of modern slavery were in the UK last year. And so it happens in every business, in every sector rather, every street, every corner, modern slavery exists. And so in terms of the signs, it's difficult because it's hidden. That's the point, isn't it? It's hidden in plain sight. But you're looking at people who are particularly withdrawn, particularly vulnerable. You know, there's concerns around their living situation, or you feel like there always has to be someone with them coming to appointments or coming to interviews. Those are some telltale signs. In terms of practical steps, in terms of remediation, Bright Future is a really practical step to take. We work with 13 amazingly passionate businesses across the UK, one of which being Speedy Hire, who open doors for us and champion us. And we really work with survivors and work with their needs and how we can support them. And what we see is survivors progress incredibly quickly in roles once they feel safe and once they feel stable.
Thank you. So yes, as you say, a human-centric approach will pay dividends.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everybody on the panel. I think we're coming up to the end of this short session. So many thanks to everybody, but I'd just like to add a very quick plug for Construction News, as we are running a feature on this very topic of modern slavery in our February edition. So please keep an eye out for that. So that's all for this episode of Construction News First Sight. Thank you very much for listening.